Okay, first I'm going to focus on presenting some of the disadvantages that would occur if we ban homeschooling for children under the age of 18, and then I will focus on rebutting some of our opponents' claims. But first off, homeschooling saves money for the government and taxpayers. According to a study called according to an academic article called "Homeschooling: The Sleeping Giant of American Education," it was a U.S. Today article. The growing number of students being educated at home affects the public education system in a number of ways. Homeschooling saves taxpayers resources that otherwise would have to be spent educating these children if they had enrolled in public school. Second, homeschooling has created a very large industry. This is from an academic article, Homeschoolers in the Library, from the School Library Journal. The academic Susan G. Sheps says in this article that the provision of resources for homeschooling families, once the domain of small presses and distributors, many of them Christian in orientation, has become big business and has attracted major trade publishers of books and periodicals. And the third point is homescholars with learning disabilities and giftedness performed better than expected for students with their conditions. This is from another academic article called Defying the Stereotypes of Special Education, Homeschooling Students. It was from the Peabody Journal of Education. That's an academic journal. And quote is, homeschool students with learning disabilities and giftedness have not followed the expected patterns for students with their classifications. The education outcomes for these homeschooled special education students may be summed up as follows. They are self-confident students who have developed academic skills at very uneven rates, but who have usually achieved academic proficiency by high school. This is huge considering that most special learning disability and gifted students take much longer than the regular students to achieve proficiency by high school. My next point would be that homeschoolers with ADD and ADHD did better than public school students with ADD and ADHD. This is from an academic article called A Preliminary Investigation of the Effectiveness of Homeschool Instruction Environment for Students with Attention Deficit or Hyperactivity Disorder. This is from the academic journal School Psychology Review. The quote is, a study was conducted by Fort Hays State University about the effectiveness of homeschooling with children that have ADD and ADHD, which showed that homeschool students were, those homeschool students were academically engaged about 2 times as often as public school students with the same condition and experienced more reading and math gains. Lastly, more and more parents are homeschooling for non-religious reasons. This is from one of the articles I quoted before, Homeschoolers in the Library. It's the School Library Journal, academic journal. More and more families are homeschooling for non-religious reasons, primarily because of general dissatisfaction with public schools, a desire for family flexibility and closeness, or to provide a more positive environment for children who have learning or behavioral problems. All these benefits that I sorted from all these sources, all these sources would be lost if we banned homeschooling for children under the age of 18. And that brings me then to citing why a lot of the points that my opponents bring up do not affect homeschoolers as much as they claim. Since there's such an emphasis on social activity, I'll start there. Homeschoolers are socially active. My source is the National Home Education Research Institute, which is funded by, oh no, that's a different source. But it's from the National Home Education Research Institute. And it was done by an article by Dr. Bryan, who is an expert in the field, PhD. He said that homeschooling students are regularly engaged in social and educational activities outside their homes and with people other than their nuclear family members. They are commonly involved in activities such as field trips, scouting, 4-H, political drives, church ministry, sports teams, and community volunteer work. Now, this is a lot more than just supposedly very small homeschooling groups that my opponents have claimed that homeschoolers ever get to make contact with. Another point talking about socialization is that homeschoolers are more socially adept and mature than public schoolers. This is according to an article called Revisiting the Common Myths About Homeschooling from the Clearinghouse Academic Journal. A peer-reviewed study evaluated the communication skills, socialization, and daily living skills of public school and homeschooled students and found that homeschooled students were significantly better socialized and more mature than their public school counterparts. Okay, and since we're also talking a lot about regulation, I have this piece of evidence. This is the one I was talking to you before. Is the ERIC Clearinghouse on Assessment and Evaluation. And this is this association is funded by the National Library Services of the U.S. Department of Education. They did a study, and this was part of what they found. There was no difference found according to whether or not a parent was certified to teach. For those who would argue that only certified teachers should be allowed to teach their children at home, these findings suggest that such a requirement would not meaningfully affect student achievement. And to, again, focus on socialization, I think that is a big issue here. Adults who are homeschooled as children are active in the community. This was another article done by the National Home Education Research Institute, and basically, and it's also by Dr. Brian, a PhD expert in the area. The research based on adults who are home educated is growing. Thus far, it indicates that they participate in local community service more frequently than does the general population, vote and attend public meetings more frequently than the general population, and go to and succeed at college at an equal or higher rate than the general population. Now, I hope that I've, with all this evidence, convinced you that much of the concerns about homeschooling are unfounded and that homeschooling is a great educational alternative.